Alright, so this is the prologue. It's called The Outcast Dead. The fog was thick, muffling sound and sight. Where it parted, Will Herondale could see the street rising ahead of him, wet and black with rain, and hear the voices of the dead. Not all Shadowhunters could hear ghosts, unless the ghosts chose to be heard, but Will was one of the few who could. As he approached the old cemetery, their voices rose in a ragged musical chorus. This was not a peaceful burial ground, but Will knew that. It was not his first visit to the Crossbones graveyard. He did his best to block out the noise, hunching his shoulders, so that his collar covered his ears, his head down, a fine mist of rain dampening his black hair. The entrance to the cemetery was halfway down the block, a pair of wrought iron gates set into a high stone wall. Any mundane passing by could see the thick chain that bound the gates shut, and the sign declaring the premises closed. It had been 15 years since a body was buried here, but the place itself remained as yet undesecrated. As Will neared the gates, something no mundane would have seen materialized out of the fog. A knocker in the shape of a hand, the fingers skeletal. Will reached out with his own gloved hands and lifted the knocker, letting it fall once, twice, 3 times. For several long moments, nothing happened. Beyond the gates, Will saw mist, rising like steam from the ground, obscuring the grave markers and the long, uneven plots of earth between them. Slowly, the mist began to rise and coalesce, taking on an eerie blue glow. Will put his hands to the bars of the gate. The cold of the metal seeped through his gloves into his bones. It was more than an ordinary cold. When ghosts rose, they drew energy from their surroundings, depriving the air and the space around them of heat. The hair on the back of Will's neck prickled and stood up, as the blue mist formed into the shape of an old woman in a ragged dress. "Hello, Molly," said Will. "You're looking fine this evening, if I do say so." The ghost raised her head. Old Molly was a strong spirit, one of the stronger Will had encountered. Even as moonlight speared through the clouds, she hardly looked transparent. "William Herondale," she said. "Back again so soon?" Will leaned against the gate. "You know I missed your pretty face?" She grinned, and he saw the skull through her half-transparent skin. Overhead the clouds closed in, black and roiling, blocking out the moon. Idly, Will wondered what Molly had done to get herself buried here, far from consecrated ground. She chortled. "What do you want, young Shadowhunter? Malthus venom? Talons of a Morax demon?" "No," Will said. "That's not what I need. I need 4 demon powders. Ground up fine." Molly paled, if a ghost could have paled, as Will spoke. Will exhaled, his breath turning to mist on the cold air. "Surely," he said, "that's hardly the worst thing anyone's ever paid you for." It was always like this. She pretended to argue, but she gave in eventually. Magnus had already sent Will to Molly several times, once for black, stinking candles that stuck to his skin like tar, once for the bones of an unborn child, and once for a bag of fairy eyes that dripped blood on his shirt. She slid her hands into the pouch at the front of her apron. When she removed them, she was holding a faded cloth bag tied with a scrap of dirty ribbon. "This is a trap, isn't it? Some kind of trick." "You Nephilim catch me selling this sort of stuff, and it's the stick for me, it is." "You're already dead," Will said. "I don't know what you think the clave could do to you now." "Ha!" her hollow eyes gleamed. "The presence of the silent brothers can hold the living or the dead." Will held his hands up. "This is no trick. Surely you must have heard the rumors and now running around Downworld. The clave has other things on its mind than tracking down ghosts who traffic in demon power and fairy blood." He leaned forward. "I'll give you a good price." He drew a cambric bag from his pocket and dangled it in the air. It clinked like coins rattling together. "They all fit your description." An eager look came over her dead face. She solidified enough to take the bag from him. She plunged one hand into it and brought her palm out full of rings, gold wedding rings. Old Molly, like many ghosts, was always looking for that talisman, that lost piece of her past that would allow her to die. In her case, it was her wedding ring. It was common belief, Magnus had said to Will, that the ring was long gone, buried under the silty bed of the Thames. But in the meantime, she'd take any bag of found rings on the hope one would turn out to be hers. So far, it hadn't happened. She dropped the rings back in the bag, which vanished somewhere on her undead person, and handed him a folded sachet of powder in return. He slipped it into his jacket pocket just as the ghost began to shimmer and fade. "Hold up, that's not all I've come for, Molly." "Very well. What else do you want?" Will hesitated. This was not something Magnus had sent him for. It was something he wanted for himself. "Love potions." Molly screamed with laughter. "Love potions for you? It's not my way to turn down payment, but anyone who looks like you doesn't need a love potion, and that's a fact." "No," Will said. I was looking for the opposite, something that might put an end to being in love." "A hatred potion." "I was hoping for something more like indifference or a toleration potion." She made a snorting noise. I hardly like to tell you this, Nephilim, but if you want a girl to hate you, there's easy ways of making that happen. You don't need my help. And with that, she vanished, spinning away into the mist among the graves, Will looking after her side. Not for her, he said, under his breath, though there was no one to hear him.